So James is going to talk about a book that, or a few books that he read. But first I'm going to mention this Black Lightning, complete second season. Terrible. It's so unwatchable.
Did that just finish, or is that
it's still on?
Oh,
Dogs
it's still
can
on.
watch it while we're out
Yeah,
here.
is that why they're crying with anger?
Yes. Boy, that's a... I can feel the cold snow.
Yeah, but you know, you can hopefully you can feel the warm sun.
Yes.
Yeah, it's awesome. You know, like we've had days where there's been no snow that have been much colder than this.
Yes. It's actually, you know, the wind that we had yesterday was harder to dine through than the colder air of today, honestly.
And it actually wasn't that bad yesterday, really. So, or maybe you didn't like it, but thanks for...
You have already talked about that socialism thing.
Okay, did I talk about this one?
I don't know.
I don't think so. So one of them I hadn't talked about, I'm pretty sure. So
okay, well you definitely haven't talked about that.
I haven't talked about this one. So A Question of Guilt. This is dates from 1986. Let's see. 1989. I think the murder happened. Maybe 86 or something like that. Maybe a little earlier. So as a spoiled little rich kid, but he was, in some ways, he wasn't spoiled. Like he'd been kind of neglected, some abuse, I think, too. Anyway, he killed someone who'd kind of a somewhat older woman. How old was he when he committed the murder? 17 or something like that. She was maybe 23. So she'd kind of tried to do a social worker thing with him on a, you know, but she wasn't a social worker or anything. She was a very nice person. She was part of the Eaton family. That was something of a marketing dynasty here in Canada. The dynasty finally went kaput within the last 20 years or so, I believe it was. But she wasn't that well off. But she, you know, they say she didn't live well off, wasn't well off, but they lived in Rosedale. And I'm going, you know, like Rosedale's considered one of the fancier sections of Toronto, right? But maybe she lived on the poor side of Rosedale. I don't know if there's such a thing. Anyway, it's, you know, like, to blame her would be to blame the victim. She was trying to be nice, you know. She wasn't an expert on these sorts of things. She had hearing troubles, you know.
So that's A Question of Guilt.
A Question of Guilt, of murder of Nancy Eaton. And, you know, it's a fallout, and we still have the fallout from, I think it's like Freudianism and nature and nurture and all this kind of stuff. So there's been this idea around for quite a while that, you know, like people are shaped by their nurture, and yeah, they are, but, you know, then there was this idea that they could be remolded. Yeah, you know, like people really get molded a lot the first 3 years.
Definitely.
Not quite as much the next 3 years. First 6 years, they're pretty well... A lot of them is shaped, and if they're so this guy was in, he had a very, 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 very bad temper. I think he shot someone who was living with him, right? It was an aunt or something like that, and or at least he pulled a gun on them. I can't remember exactly, you know, like or a knife. Yeah.
I didn't understand it when I was young, but a lot of the friends that I had as a teenager when I was rebelling against my father, really, but my parents, but more my father. They were from broken families, so their they were raised by their mother or sometimes their father, but the marriages had fallen apart, and I hadn't understood it. And I feel very thankful that not only that my parents stayed together, their marriage wasn't the greatest, but it certainly wasn't the worst I've heard of, and I had the role models of my grandparents on my father's side, that they had a wonderful marriage. They were very much in love, and they lived, I saw them every day when I was very little, so I understood what to look for, I think, and I think that's what ended up bringing me to you eventually. So I don't know, not everyone has that, and then if you don't have that when you're young, I don't know if you can ever really recover from it. I don't think you could. You know, it's sad, but I don't know if you can really have a healthy relationship with anyone else, and I don't know if you can really have be expected to be healthy parents, honestly. So.
So yeah, there was a bit of an issue of whether this guy was crazy, all that sort of stuff, right? And I think he maybe got convicted of something like manslaughter or whatever. He has trouble getting released. But, you know, to me it doesn't make any difference whether a person's called crazy or classed as crazy or convicted as being crazy, or they did it with malice aforethought and planned it all out. You can't trust them out in society.
Sure.
So I'm not looking for any revenge when it comes to the jail system. I don't think there should be fines except for real light misdemeanors. Fines are a way of rich people of getting away with, well, sometimes murder, I suppose, or borderline murder. But the thing that jails should be nice. They shouldn't be hellholes and all that sort of stuff. You know, they should have, I don't know about internet, but they should have nice TVs, and you know, if they don't want to have to share a cell with an idiot, they shouldn't have to, and all this sort of stuff. And but they should be separate from the rest of the population. There would be a punishment, and that is getting stuck with other criminals. That's the way it goes, you know. Like, if you want to be a criminal, you get to hang with them. That's
well, I
what
don't
should
think.
be.
Well, I mean, some people might want to be a criminal, but I think it's just how you were raised, and sometimes, I mean, there might be a mental component from just maybe I don't know, some sort of mistreatment within the womb or something, some sort of genetic problems or something that without even.
This guy might have had something.
I mean,
you know what I'm saying?
Right?
It might have been
But,
just something genetic. We've seen with dogs that, you know, like we had one male dog who was a father dog, and his offspring, he was really, really cranky, and his offspring are pretty cranky.
You're right. Yeah.
So
But-
they're like Chihuahuas, only more so.
Yeah,
know?
but you were saying this guy was neglected.
Yeah,
And
there
I
was
think
that.
happens a
I
lot of
think
the
it was
time.
mainly
Like,
that.
were his parents still together, or they were
Well, I think
just
they were
busy
separate.
doing
You know,
something
like it
else?
looks as though boys need some sort of a father figure, or it's not a guaranteed thing, I guess, but they have a greater tendency towards violence. So, and I'm saying
Well,
they
I
need
don't think it's
a
just
good
boys.
father figure.
I think that
Well, there'd be different things for
I think
girls.
that
I don't know.
children need a positive male and female role model.
Well, you know, I think they need as many possible role
Yes.
models as possible. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
So sometimes I think a nuclear family's not enough. You know, like our parents were going around always saying, we don't favor anyone. We don't prefer any one of you kids. There were 7 kids all told in the family, and we're going, you know.
Well, my
We
dad
were rolling
told me
our
the
eyes
truth
even when
about
they were
that.
there. You know.
But, you know, like, I was not his favorite. But later on, he told me that he was proud of me and everything, and
That's nice.
so, I mean, he told me the truth right along. He did not like me when I was a child. I was way too strong for his taste. I was not what he thought a girl should be. And my sister was. So, but later on, I mean, he grew to appreciate me for who I was, and I'm really
Well,
thankful
that's
for
good
that.
he was able
you know,
to say
because
that before he died,
yeah,
right?
because I know that he was honest about that too. So, yeah.
So my
Anyway.
parents were trying to be honest. It's not as though they were, you know, just lying outright or stuff like that. I think what they were basically saying is we try to be
Sure.
objective and all that sort of stuff. So it's not as though I'm cynically sit back and say, oh, you know, they're just totally lying. But you know, like, and it's not as though I'm, you know, a disaffected kind of person. Oh man. Neither of my parents like me. You know, like when my siblings said I was my mom's favorite or second favorite, I had to say, yeah, it could be, you know. And it probably was right. At times I might have been her second favorite. She said that my sister with schizophrenia was brighter than I.
So
Oftentimes
you
that
wanted
happens
to
with
bring out
schizophrenia.
socialism, and you know it's
Yeah.
interesting because I was just thinking about how um, the saying religion is the opiate of the people or whatever,
Yeah.
and I don't believe that at all. Actually, I mean, if you think about it, with when people are up to their own devices and stuff in our society, uh, religion is being cast away for the most part, and people are coming home from work and spending their money on garbage, that trickles up, flies up, just flies up to the top 1%, the money that they've been working for why, and then they're relaxing with a bag of potato chips or some other junk food after work in front of the television, or some ice cream or something like that. And so there you go. That's what I think is the opiate of the people, because that's what the people are choosing.
That's what it's
So-
tended to be. But you know what I was thinking about? So one of the things is, I think I've done this one before, the Politically Incorrect Guide to Socialism.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've got 2 politically incorrect guides. Do not waste your money buying these new. Fact is, don't waste your money buying them used.
Like you did.
Well, I didn't really waste the money because, like what I do is compare and contrast with what they're saying in these books and what's in the originals. That's what I recommend. So for socialism, they got Karl Marx here with an Obama button here.
I noticed that our library just recently picked up a copy, within our library system, of the Communist Manifesto.
Yeah, so that's a short read. Read that. It's pretty well required reading for anyone who's, for anyone. That sort of stuff. Eventually we'll go through it and stuff like that. It's very
I
short.
can put it on hold if you want.
I've got a copy of it.
I know
so,
you do.
Yeah, there we go. Well,
Do you
can
know
get a
where it
hold of
is?
it. Yeah.
Okay, then
No.
I don't need to put a
no.
copy. Hold on it. Somebody
Yeah,
else can.
plus I have, a couple of things, short things by Marx and Engels from back when. So, well, I've got all sorts of stuff, but immediately available. I mean, I got Das Kapital translated in English, all that sort of stuff. So it's actually recommended, if you're really interested in this sort of stuff, read Das Kapital. All 3 volumes. Good luck slogging through it. But, I really don't want to hear people talking about socialism. I knew one guy who was a communist, right? And he had a copy of lots of Marx, lots of Lenin, all that sort of stuff. And it was the first person to really go through them was me, because we had them at our little... we had a little club downtown, a loft kind of stuff. But what he'd gone through was one of these things that were put out by some Marxists here. The cartoon versions of things. So they had a cartoon version of Freud, cartoon version. And it was just like dirty, it's just filthy. Gone through it. That's what I don't recommend that, because those are just popularizations and stuff like that. It's like reading a popularization of the cure for cancer and thinking that you're going to be able to cure cancer or whatever. Read the original, please, that sort of stuff. Now you can get some interesting sort of stuff. What they claim is, and I think it's true, that the Indian economy, which is actually maybe more socialistic in terms of being social democratic than any other in the world, and their economy underperformed. It just didn't perform as well as, let's say, the Scandinavian economies. And Scandinavian economies, however much people might want to say it's pure socialism, they had companies, even arms companies like Bofors in Sweden, right? Big arms company. And so it was a mixed sort of thing, a mixture of capitalism and socialism. That's not necessarily what I would recommend. If
Well, haven't the Swedish really been importing raw materials from elsewhere and then selling it back to countries in a different form? So they've been like pulling the yellow with...
Well, there's a lot of yellows. Socialists, stomping around in the West tend to be yellows. So they were the yellows that got, like in Russia, they're the ones that got whacked, right? because they just buy the reds.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of yellows, and or they have been traditionally in Sweden, but they're in trouble now in Sweden. But yeah, like so, socialism, pure socialism, didn't really work in India. And I'm not talking about where they ended up. I'm talking about actual growth rates. It just
I
didn't
mean,
work
I
out.
hear a lot of people complaining in Canada. I've heard all my life people are complaining about how the raw materials, how Canada is selling all of its lumber and oil and everything, just raw materials, and then buying like IKEA furniture made of cardboard or whatever, and it doesn't make any sense. When people will say we need to do make sure that refinement of oil is done here for jobs, and this and that, rather than pipelining it right out of the country and getting nothing for it, But
in order to do, go on.
but the fact of the matter is that's never really been an option for us. I don't believe that it has. I believe that we've been put here or encouraged to come here, our ancestors or whatever, and just to hold the land for some Europeans.
Well, originally it was
that,
for the Brits, right?
Well,
Well, originally it's for the French, and then the Brits. The French would be the fur trade and all that sort of stuff.
yeah, but
And
it's
then
not the people who came here. The people who came here were just trying to hold a spot, and
Okay.
so that the resources could be shuffled out.
Yeah, I guess you didn't hear. I said
Yeah.
for the Brits,
Yeah. Okay.
and then for the French. So yeah, they were flunkies that were sent out here,
Yes.
and now we're the flunkies for the Americans, and it's been that way
Yeah.
basically since World War II. Before then, we were basically more allied with the Brits when it came to the economy. After World War II, the Americans knew they were vulnerable, especially when it came to oil.
Mm.
Before then, the Americans could provide a lot of their stuff from domestically, and then the smarter of them realized we're using up a lot of resources, and they much prefer dealing with Canada. And when people say, "Oh, Americans prefer dealing with dictators," no, they prefer dealing with Canada. And yeah, they've kind of messed around with the political system, but not the way they mess around with dictatorships and stuff like that. We've never, despite the threats of the NDP and stuff
So
like
I
that,
don't
we've
know
never
about,
been invaded like
like,
Iraq was.
I often hear people talking about how to measure the strength of an economy or this and that, and honestly, I would rather our economy that we had less money and more natural forests and stuff like that, honestly. Because the things that are being exported have more value 100 years from now than they have right now.
Yeah, it's like not saving stuff in your piggy bank.
Yeah,
You've got a
and I
point.
mean, some people have noticed, like that one instructor, the robotics, whatever lady, artificial intelligence or whatever that course was, yeah, that
Presentation.
we're in Canada, we're raised to be consumers, and yeah, we are. We have been right along, and why is that? I mean, you're noticing these small little bits, but if you just pay attention to a wider scope of reality, then you come to the conclusion that this is what it's been all along for us. We just passively sit by and go along with it.
Well, originally we weren't consumers so much as producers of raw materials. But I think in that presentation, that woman was saying that we hardly had any background in computer science, right? In high schools, junior highs.
Programming. Yeah.
Program. And I see it over at university. You'll hardly see anyone who's of Canadian extraction. You'll see Russians over there in computer science and math. You'll see. I've seen more people from Iran than I've seen Canadian over there, if I'm not mistaken, or about as many. I'm probably exaggerating, but it's Iran's a long ways away. It's 2-3 times as big as Canada in terms of population, but yeah, it's amazing. I've seen guy from, I believe, it was in Mexico, Guillermo. Lots of people from Iran. Yes, if you're not cutting edge when it comes to intelligence, you're not going to be doing finished products.
Well, no, and I mean, this summer earlier we were talking about, while I was reviewing a book about Microsoft, I think it was, and how the jobs of the future are going to be, they're looking for people that can work with other people. So basically they're looking for greens, and the average global income of the, what was it? I can't remember what kind of computer thing it's called. These little jobs that basically it's like contract work. You get a little job and you get it done and you get a little bit of money, and the income worked out to be on average something like $7.50 an hour, and that's the global rate right now. I mean, we live in a global society, so we can expect that. And then the average education was something like a master's degree or something, so that's what you can expect. You're going to need to get a master's degree to get $7.50 an hour, and you're going to have to be green, because aggressive personality types, I mean, how much use do you have for that? For parasites? I mean, why employ them? So
Whales have no use for yellows, except to use them as useful idiots.
Yeah.
And they will use them. That's how the communists used a lot of people like George Bernard Shaw, Sidney and Beatrice
Well, in the
Webb.
past, but now, I mean, you could make movies entirely without them soon. I mean, that's what we saw with that Will Smith thing.
Oh, communists are very different from capitalists. Capitalists, they won't kill them. They'll just let them starve to death.
Yeah. So, I mean, all the yellow jobs really could be done without them now. I mean, all of the voice transplant. You could have, I just watched a preview for Judy Garland as Renee Zellweger, and I'm like, really? But honestly, I mean, you could have Judy Garland singing to you for in whatever popular song they come up with next, or so why not?
Yep.
And they could all look like Marilyn Monroe if you want them to.
Exactly right. Judy Garland looking like Marilyn Monroe. Judy Garland's voice. So, yeah, I think actors are big trouble.
Like, what was that show that Kathy used to like to? Oh, I'm not supposed to say Kathy's name. She doesn't want me to. What was that show that she used to like she used to like to watch with the woman and the man that were married on MTV? Do you remember? And the man was always making fun of the woman. They were newlyweds or something. They were both rock stars. Or pop stars, I guess.
Oh!
What was that called?
It was Jessica Simpson and some other idiot.
Okay.
Was it Jessica Simpson?
I have no idea.
She was blonde.
I don't know
right?
these people. So, yeah, and we just felt sorry for the woman. But they showed live things of them, and they did not have good voices in real life when it wasn't manipulated by technology. And anyway, it was really sickening to watch their relationship, which was bad, and he was such a douche. And like, there was one episode where she was eating something and she couldn't tell whether it was chicken or tuna, and there were different things like that. And honestly, I'm watching this going, maybe it is. Just because it has tuna on the label in big writing, I doubt that you can be sure about that. It might be 99% chicken for all I know, or whatever. So I don't know if they should have made fun of her for that. Probably was chicken or whatever. Who knows?
Politically Incorrect Guide, so PIG, politically, and these are action volumes. There are several sorts of things. They're coming from a fairly right-wing point of view. Some of these things I pointed out before, like the Politically Incorrect Guide to the Civil War. That one's That one's, just based on what I'm seeing, they're probably going to be very offensive. And this might be offensive to some people. Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam. Oh, and the Crusades. There's maybe a bit too much about the Crusades in here. They actually have Deus Vult in here, which means God wills. And it's understood God wills it. And that's what I believe the Pope who started the thing said when he, gave the call to the Crusaders. Deus Vult, God wills. So that doesn't belong there. Oh, it's kind of offensive. But I think this guy is relatively serious. So they've got a couple of scholars in here. Ibn Warraq in here giving a blurb. I don't think Ibn Warraq is, maybe he's right there, but he's, I gather he's a Muslim who, in order to preserve his hide,
Cat's pregnant.
as in, yeah.
Isn't it early for a cat to be pregnant? Like, why is it pregnant right now?
I think they would have their kids in the springtime. So, but it is early.
I mean, that cat's quite pregnant.
Anyway, Ibn Warraq is a pseudonym, and apparently it could even be a she, does it to protect his hide. And I don't think it should be that way, really. But at any rate, don't buy this book. Don't even bother getting it out. Read the Quran. And, the guy who taught me Islam out of university thought when I said, you should just read the Quran, that I was saying you should just read it. He was saying that, well, that shows how Protestant you are. There's all these, I can say all sorts of things about, what you believe in, and it's because of your beliefs. That says nothing. But, that's where you start. You read the ahadith, which is plural for hadith, which are traditions of what Muhammad did and said. And you also read the seerahs. There's at least two of them. These are biographies. I gather they're basically based on his hadiths, or the hadiths, and they're biographies of Muhammad. There's at least two of them. And read those sorts of things. Don't depend on this sort of stuff. Robert Spencer, who wrote this, I think he's not using a pseudonym, but on his internet site, or one of his internet sites, he says, I'm not going to disclose my address for my own self-preservation, and that might be true. There's probably people gunning for him. He's not very politically correct, but like I say, I don't recommend this. I recommend actually reading the original, and then rereading it. And,
I know you were thinking about this because of talking to the woman yesterday.
Yeah, exactly right. So there was a woman yesterday. She heard me talking about the Confucian Analects and Mencius, the works of Mencius, and what else was I talking about? But I was just talking about things generally. Like I just said, my wife and I were reading the Tibetan. This was to someone else, reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and my wife said something to the effect it was boring.
Yeah, well, James fell asleep while I was reading aloud.
There we go.
So there you go.
Well,
he falls asleep.
Yeah, I know. That's not necessarily a reflection, but that's usually my reaction to religious documents, right? Doesn't matter, like I've gone through a lot of religious documents, some in the original, like not all of the Old Testament, the original Hebrew, but substantial swatches. Same sort of thing with the original Greek of the New Testament. Not all of it, but substantial swatches. That's in the original. I've gone through substantial swatches of the Srimad Bhagavatam.